Today, we're doing something a little different, a really special deep dive. We're going to take a full journey into the mystical architecture behind one of the most fascinating and frankly strange figures in the whole Torah, Balaam. We're going way beyond the simple story of a prophet for hire. Instead, guided by the Zohar, we're going to explore Balaam as the master architect of solitary defilement. I mean, this is literally the blueprint for how to intentionally cut yourself off from holiness to become a channel for cosmic impurity. All right, let's jump right in.
Our whole journey kicks off with this one seemingly simple phrase, but when you look at it through the lens of the mystics, it is a massive cinematic clue. The key word here? Night. You see, in Kabbalah, night isn't just when the sun goes down. No way. It's a specific cosmic state. It's a time when the forces of dinam, these forces of strict judgment, are dominant, when the veils between the worlds get a little thinner and, a certain license is given to the forces of the Sitra Achra, the other side. So when the Torah tells us God came to Balaam at night, it's not just telling us the time of day. It's setting the scene in a specific spiritual dimension, a dimension Balaam chose deliberately to operate in. I want you to really picture this with me, like full 4K cinematic style. Imagine Balaam standing completely, utterly alone. He's on some desolate, wind-swept hill. You can hear the wind howling around, but right where he's standing, there's this unnatural, charged stillness. It's like sound itself is being bent away from him. And the shadows, they're not just dark, they seem to be getting thicker. They're coalescing, almost like they're alive and hungry. Now, this is not an accident. This whole setup is his laboratory. He has deliberately separated himself from everything, from the world, from community, from any lingering trace of holiness, to engineer a perfect spiritual vacuum. He's creating a void, a sterile environment, so he can draw down the most potent, impure forces in the cosmos. You can just feel the tension, because this is a profound, willed act of separation.
So, to really understand this dark architecture, here's our game plan. We're going to move through 6 key areas. We'll start by painting a portrait of what this defilement even looks like. Then we'll dive into the paradox of his isolation, dissect the anatomy of the other side he was tapping into, see how he was essentially hacking the cosmos, and then finally we'll look at the antidote, the protective power of unity, before we wrap up our journey.
Okay, let's start with this absolutely fundamental idea, the isolation paradox. Because here's the thing, not all solitude is created equal. Spiritually speaking, being alone can be the most powerful catalyst for growth, or it can be the fastest path to total destruction. It's a tool, and everything depends on the intention of the person who's using it.
Now, what's so powerful about this is the contrast. Just think about Jacob for a second, alone by the river. His solitude is all about vulnerability. He's stripped of everything, he's open, he's totally receptive. His struggle is for a connection with God, right? An encounter that ends up transforming him. Balaam's solitude is the polar opposite. It's predatory, it's active, he's not being receptive, he's projecting, he's trying to dominate, not connect. His isolation isn't a struggle for God, it's a strategic move to grab power from the other side. He's making a void, not so God can fill it, but so he can control it.
And the force that he's trying to channel, well, it has a name. Ruach Tumah, the spirit of impurity. Now, according to the Zohar, this isn't just about being unclean or something. It's an active, you could almost say parasitic, cosmic consciousness, and it's drawn to spiritual voids like a vacuum cleaner sucks up dust. So when a person intentionally cuts themselves off from the network of holiness, from communities, from Torah, from God, they create a vacancy. Balaam is the absolute master of this. His self-imposed isolation is the ultimate act of engineering a vacancy. It's a direct invitation for this Ruach Tumah to come right in and use him as its vessel.
Okay, so if Balaam is creating this channel, what exactly is on the other end of the line? To get that, we need to look at the very blueprint of reality, at least as it's described in Kabalah. We've got to explore the anatomy of this other side. All right, a super quick overview. This is the divine architecture. The 10 Sephiroth aren't 10 separate gods or anything like that. They're 10 luminous vessels, 10 interconnected channels that the infinite divine light flows through to create and sustain, well, everything. It's all one single, unified, interdependent system of holiness. And this right here is such a crucial point. The Sitra Achra, this other side, isn't some competing, independent, evil empire. It's the shadow cast by the light of the Sephiroth. The mystics call it the world of Kelopot, which means husks or shells. Imagine the Sephiroth are these beautiful vessels filled with brilliant light.
The kelipot are the broken shards, the empty shells that got detached from that light source. They have no life of their own. They can only exist by attaching to and feeding off sparks of holiness.
And here you see the inverted blueprint. Each Sephirah of holiness has a shadow that mimics and perverts its function. So where Tiferet is harmony, its shadow is dispute. Where Chesed is loving kindness, its shadow is just absorption and consumption. Balaam's entire project, his whole goal, is to consciously disconnect from the holy Sephirot, especially Tiferet, which is like the central trunk of harmony, and Malkut, the divine presence in our world, so he can plug his consciousness directly into this shadow network of separation and chaos.
And now we can finally understand why Balaam chose his very specific methods. He was a master of inversion. He took elements that could be used for holiness and just flipped them on their head. Night, which could be a time for deep Torah study, for him becomes the time when the forces of judgment are strongest, opening the gates to the other side. A desolate place, which for a true prophet could be a site for pure connection, for him it becomes a spiritual vacuum, an open field with no firewall of community. And solitude, which has the potential for a divine encounter like Jacob had, becomes the active, open channel for defilement. He combined all three to create a perfect storm.
You know, his whole system was an inversion of holiness, right down to the numbers. Take the number 1. In holiness, 1 is Ehad, the ultimate statement of divine unity, the idea that everything is interconnected. But in Balaam's hands, 1 represents the arrogant ego, the isolated self that stands apart from everything and says, it's all about me. It's the one of total disconnection.
The number 10 always signifies a complete system. You've got the 10 Sephirot, which create this complete, harmonious structure of holiness. Well, the Sitra Achra mirrors that with its own complete system of 10 inverted crowns, the 10 forces of impurity. So Balaam isn't just messing around with a little bit of chaos. He's trying to master an entire counter-system, a full architecture of anti-holiness.
12. That's the number of holy structure and order. Think of the 12 tribes of Israel. They form a sanctified interlocking community. Every tribe has its place, its flag, its purpose within the whole. This is the very structure of divine order on earth that Balaam's power is designed to shatter. He's trying to break that holy order from the outside by exploiting the very concept of being an outsider.
And finally, we have 13. This represents the 13 attributes of divine mercy, a force that actually transcends the ordered system of 10. It's like a cosmic failsafe, a superstructure of compassion that can override strict judgment. But by intentionally isolating himself in a domain of pure judgment and separation, Balaam makes this level of reality totally inaccessible to himself. He has literally locked himself out from the ultimate source of divine protection and mercy.
Even the colors get twisted. In holiness, colors are just emanations of divine light. So white is the flowing light of chesed, of kindness. But in the realm of impurity, it becomes the paleness of death, the emptiness of a life that's been drained away. Red is the focused power of Gevurah, strength and judgment. In its shadow it becomes uncontrolled rage, bloodlust, a total distortion of pure power. And dark or black, which in holiness represents tzimtzum, the profound awe of divine concealment, becomes the void, a spiritual black hole that just consumes all light and meaning. So, yeah, those are the mystical mechanics. It's incredibly deep stuff. The question is, how can we possibly understand this today? Let's try to translate these ancient concepts into a couple of modern analogies to make it all crystal clear.
Let's try to frame this in 2 different ways. First, we'll think of it as a kind of cosmic engineering for the adults, and then we'll do a video game scenario that really anyone can get.
So from a cosmic engineering perspective, you have to think of Balaam as a malicious actor, basically a hacker. First, step 1, he disables the divine firewall. He does that by separating himself from Malkut, the divine presence that sanctifies the world. Step 2, he actively opens malicious ports. His incantations, his focused will, that's him opening a connection to a known unsecured network, the Sitra Achra. Third, he isolates his system from the trusted network. The community is that trusted encrypted network that offers collective protection. He takes himself completely offline from it. And finally, step 4, he invites unauthorized access. He creates the perfect vulnerability, a direct, open channel for the Ruach Tuma, the malicious code, to enter his system and use it. All right, now for the gamers. Let's imagine reality is a massive multiplayer online game. The community, so the camp of Israel, that's a sanctuary zone. You know, it's the safe town where fighting other players is turned off and monsters can't attack you. You're protected by default. What Balaam does is he intentionally leaves this safe zone. He travels out to the Forbidden Wastes. This is like a high-level, endgame area known for having really powerful and aggressive enemies. And he goes there completely alone. No party, no backup, nothing.
The second he isolates himself with this bad intention, the game's system slaps a passive debuff on his character. You know, a negative status effect. It reads, Holiness Link Severed. Instantly, his spiritual defenses are critically lowered. He is now extremely vulnerable to every kind of spiritual attack in the game.
And here is the absolute key. If you're in a group, the enemy's attention is divided, but because he is utterly alone in this super dangerous zone, the aggro range, that's the distance at which enemies will notice and attack him, becomes infinite. Every single hostile entity in that dimension is now drawn directly to him. He has made himself the only and the most irresistible target.
So if that's the blueprint for vulnerability, what's the blueprint for protection? Because the system of holiness isn't just passive. It has its own incredibly powerful architecture, a divine shield that is built through the power of unity.
So let me ask it this way. If willed, arrogant isolation is the open backdoor that invites the malware of impurity, then what's the spiritual firewall? How do we secure our own systems?
The answer is all about connection. It's unity. These are the components that make up the armor of God. Communal prayer, for example, creates a powerful unified field of sanctity that impurity has a really hard time penetrating. Studying Torah connects our minds directly to the divine consciousness. Physical mitzvot, like putting a mezuzah on our doorposts, act as physical anchors, grounding holiness right here in our tangible world. And acts of loving kindness, they weave the spiritual fabric of the community together, making the collective soul stronger. Every single one of these is the exact opposite of Balaam's path of disconnection. As we start to wrap up our journey today, we're left with this powerful, enduring lesson from these ancient mystical texts that, honestly, it resonates so deeply in our lives today.
Just think about this promise from the Psalms. Divine protection, the guardianship of angels. It's given in all your ways, which means when you are on the path, when you're walking in the ways of connection and community and holiness. This is the protection that Balaam just threw away. He didn't just step off the path, he ran in the opposite direction, to a place where those angels are commanded not to go, a place he specifically engineered to be empty of their presence.
And you know, this leaves us with a really big question for our modern world. We live in an age that glorifies radical individualism, right? The lone genius, the person who stands apart from the crowd. The story of Balaam serves as this timeless cosmic warning. It asks us to seriously consider the hidden spiritual dangers of that kind of willed isolation. In a world that seems to be constantly pulling us apart, where do we find our true, our enduring, our protective strength? The answer, echoing from the depths of the Zohar, is pretty clear. It's not in standing alone, but in standing together. Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week. If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments. We'll see you in the next chapter.